It was Master Yoda that once said, "War does not make one great." Morally and philosophically speaking, this is true. But practically, it is those who display greatness who can bring about great change within wars, and even bring them to an end. Most often we highlight greatness in terms of military might, dueling prowess, or power in the Force. But as it has been proved time and time again in the lore, one can have all of these things and still lose if they lack strategy. This is why the real greats in the wars of galactic history are those who prove to be tactical masterminds as well. The ones whose minds are sharper than any lightsaber, whose intuition and forward planning border on clairvoyancy. In the area of battle strategy, one needn't be Force sensitive to be counted among the greats. And in today's holocron, we will be attempting to label the top 5 military geniuses in Star Wars history. Now, of course, there are a lot of military masterminds that appear in the lore and in the timeline, but we aim to catalog the obvious choices for the S tier of tacticians, and if by the end you believe someone else belongs among these greats, then be sure to comment them down below, and subscribe in case we make a follow-up video on an expanded list. But now, my friends, let's begin. Our list today begins with Generals Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. We'll be addressing them both separately as well as when they work together. Individually, they are extremely formidable commanders, but when they combine their wits and talents, they become utterly unstoppable. The two share a favoritism towards deception and tactics of the unorthodox Jedi ways. Neither of them shy away from using any maneuvers necessary to catch their enemies off guard, which includes anything from surprise flanks to even false surrenders. In our own world, false surrender is classified as a war crime, but in the galaxy far, far away, war crimes are mainly focused on massacres, genocides, and crimes against civilization. So things such as sportsmanship and warfare sort of fly under the radar. Because of this, false surrender is a valid tactic, albeit extremely underhanded. It is very much in the same vein as the Trokata lightsaber combat style, not illegal necessarily, but heavily frowned upon. But it was for this very reason that Anakin and Obi-Wan got away with it so often. They were Jedi, and so it was expected that they would follow a certain moral compass, or at the very least, keep their word. But Kenobi and Skywalker both regularly exploit this expectation to catch their enemy off guard. During the Battle of Christophsis, Obi-Wan and Anakin devised a brilliant scheme to gain victory over General Loathsome. The Separatist general was about to overrun the Republic's position using a mobile deflector shield, one that protected his forces from the Republic's artillery. Anakin and Ahsoka hid disguised as pieces of debris in order to get the shield to pass over them. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan held out as long as possible until he pretended to surrender to Loathsome. Afterwards, he stalled by having tea with the general and discussing the terms of this so-called surrender. This gave enough time for Skywalker and Tano to destroy the shield generator, turning the tide of the battle. As soon as the shield went down, Obi-Wan poised to capture General Loathsome directly, and with one plan, they had completely turned around the entire Battle of Christophsis, a campaign doomed against the Republic from the very beginning. It was only a few days prior to this when Obi-Wan and Anakin would outsmart Admiral Trench, one of the Separatist's most brilliant naval minds. Anakin specifically made a name for himself as the one Jedi no one wanted to meet on the open battlefield. Even if you kept your distance, you still had to deal with his extremely unconventional tactics. During the Battle of Moonalist, for example, Anakin was leading the starfighter battle in space. He voluntarily used himself as bait in order to lure a massive number of enemy fighters into a chase. Skywalker ordered a clone squadron leader to fire all their missiles at a certain point in space. The clones obeyed the order, even though they had no clear target. But Anakin had predicted the timing perfectly, flying through their missiles and leading several squadrons of enemy fighters directly into their doom. A few of the clones' missiles had heat locked onto Anakin's starfighter, so he directed the missiles straight into the hangar of the enemy space station. The explosions of the proton torpedoes within the hangar caused a massive chain reaction, one that destroyed the entire station. This bold maneuver was something that only the galaxy's greatest pilot could have ever pulled off, and the future planning it took proved that Anakin was not all impulse either. He was truly a deadly tactician. Anytime Anakin makes a plan, it's always something incredibly risky that many others are too afraid to try, and because of that, his schemes almost always work in his favor. Even his enemies don't believe anyone is foolish enough to try the things that Anakin is willing to try, such as would be the case with the attack on the Citadel on the world of Lola Seyu. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and a squadron of clones would go to rescue Master Evan Piel and Admiral Tarkin from a Confederate prison. This was one of the most fortified locations in the Separatist strongholds, so attacking from the outside was out of the question. as were the means of infiltration. So Anakin had the brilliant idea to have himself and all of his companions frozen in carbonite and shipped directly into the facility. This was an unheard of method at the time, as it was not believed that most beings would survive the carbon freezing process. In fact, anytime a live person was frozen in carbonite, it was always as a means of cruel punishment. But Anakin knew that with precise timing, they could survive the process and thaw inside of the facility. Once inside, they pulled off a daring rescue mission and destroyed the Citadel in the process. Our next for our list is the mind that we believe is most highly underrated. Enough disrespect, my friends. It is time we pay accolades to Grand Moff Tarkin. Tarkin is overlooked as a tactician due to his moral shortcomings. He embodies the classic Imperial weaknesses of overconfidence and needless cruelty leading to a disastrous end. However, that would be roping him in with the rest of the useless Imperial High Command and ignoring the fact that he earned the respect of one Darth Sidious. Tarkin was one of the first men to be given the Moff position in the entire Empire, and it seems as though that role was held specifically for him. Palpatine sought Tarkin out when he was still a cadet in the Coruscant Flight Academy, having gained an interest in the boy after hearing about his grand reputation. Wilhuff Tarkin had stemmed from a wealthy family on the Outer Rim world of Eriadu. The Tarkins made a name for themselves after becoming the protectors of Eriadu, passing the torch of law and order down several generations of their family tree. It was customary for all Tarkin males to go on to sojourn into the harsh wilderness of Eriadu, a horrid place known as Carrion. There, they were forced to survive or to die trying. As a young child, Wilhuff was brought into the wilderness by his great uncle, where he was taught to kill and gut animals with his bare hands, steal prey from predators, and think like a beast. The whole excursion was to be as intense as possible, a coming-of-age ritual where Tarkins learned about the chaos that lies outside of civilization. They are taught that if they do not impose law and order, this same chaos will consume the galaxy. Any who oppose this order are no better than the animals of the wilderness, and must be dealt with accordingly. Wilhuff carried this lesson from the world of Carrion into his military career, where he got his start as a member of the Outland Defense Force, a naval militia in the Outer Rim territory. At just 18 years old, Wilhuff proved that he brought more to the table than a ruthless policy of zero tolerance. He made a name for himself by capturing an incredibly elusive pirate, the pirate Kana, who had been pillaging ore shipments from Eriadu. She attacked the convoy seemingly at random, choosing completely arbitrary freighters in order to haul off for her reserves. Her method and frequency of attack was so strange that none of the other high command officers could predict when and where she would strike, making defense of the convoys nearly impossible. But it was Tarkin who discovered her secret. He gave himself wholly to the study of her attacks, analyzing her battles on the shipment containers, and dug into her past to discover why she sought out such a weird pattern. He found that Kana was not her original name, but one she adopted after her father had relocated her family to the world of Asmeru. In the ancient language of that world, Kana referred to an age-old festival that always fell on the same day of the planet's calendar, the 234th day in the 16th month. Kana had assigned each of the 5 members, 23416, to a letter in her name. She then used that as a sequence for choosing shipment containers. Once Tarkin grasped the pattern and observed it in practice, he trapped the shipping container that he predicted would be her next target, uploading a computer virus to its hyperdrive motivator. As soon as the pirates nabbed the crate, the virus wormed its way into their ship's systems, overriding its navicomputers. The jump to hyperspace that they attempted landed them in a location where the Outland Defense warships were lying in wait of an ambush. Tarkin got the honor of deciding the fate of the pirate warlord as well, and his decision was to make a cruel example of her. He had her and her crew set aboard a doomed vessel aimed towards the sun. Cameras inside of the vessel recorded them live as they all screamed and begged for their lives, all of them slowly burning to death upon approaching the star. Tarkin had this footage basically live streamed to the rest of her crew, having the criminal warlord serve as a warning to them all. When you boil it down, Grand Moff Tarkin's greatest tactical strength is his genius in recognizing and exploiting patterns. At one point, a group of insurrectionists were attacking an Imperial station that was in a neighboring system to the one that he was running. Tarkin had a tactical display brought up so that he could analyze the attack. but he soon realized that the tactical display that he was watching was a forgery. The insurrectionists hadn't actually attacked the neighboring base, but had fabricated the footage and broadcasted it to Tarkin's base via the HoloNet. This was to lure Tarkin into sending off his Star Destroyers to help the neighboring base, leaving him vulnerable to a real attack. Tarkin deduced all of this by noticing the footage he was watching had a certain distortion, one that only appeared in pre-recorded HoloNet feeds, not secure Imperial networks. He ended up having his Star Destroyers depart anyway, as if they were going off to help the neighboring station. But instead, he had the destroyers lie in wait on the edge of the system. As predicted, the insurrectionists attacked and Tarkin recalled the destroyer, catching his attackers unaware and destroying them all. Tarkin's pattern recognition enabled him to solve many other mysteries as well. For instance, he deduced all by himself who Darth Vader truly was. The very first time he had ever worked with the Jedi, he had observed their training out of sheer fascination. He could tell that each Jedi had a unique style, and he got good enough where he could tell the lightsaber forms apart without ever having learned of them formally. He then later was able to recognize that Darth Vader's style bore a striking resemblance to that of Anakin Skywalker's. What's more was his closeness to Darth Sidious, his military command style, and his rapport with the stormtroopers. All of this led Tarkin to realizing that Vader was none other than Anakin Skywalker. Tarkin would deduce that he and Palpatine were both likely two of a kind, Sith Lords. To take things even further, Tarkin even figured out and deduced the real reason the Jedi had attempted to arrest Palpatine, leading to his deformity. But Tarkin cared very little for the ancient struggle between two old religions. He only cared for law and order, something he believed the Sith brought to the galaxy and that the Jedi had failed to do. And so, he kept his mouth shut, also somewhat fearing for his own good. But speaking of Jedi and Sith leaders, none could ever compare to the likes of Revan, who is our second to last selection. Many attribute Revan with being the most brilliant Jedi tactician in history, and it's often said that the Republic victory during the Mandalorian Wars was entirely devoted to Revan. He was the one who turned an entire war around, one that threatened to bring the Republic to its knees before he joined it. Before Revan's involvement, Mandalore the Ultimate had penetrated the Inner Rim and was on a fast track to decimating the entire core. But once Revan joined the war, he took command over the Republic forces and rolled back almost all of Mandalore's gains. He began by retaking Terrace, then totally wiping out the Mandalorian ground forces on the world of Althir. Revan did something no other Jedi before him would. He matched the Mandalorians' brutality. Revan understood that these warriors only respected strength and did not believe the Republic or the Jedi had that strength. So Revan decided to match them, becoming merciless. He was willing to sacrifice entire worlds and populations if it meant that he could simply outmaneuver the Mandalorians. And broadly speaking, it was a smashing success. After a decade, Revan managed to completely reverse all of the Mandalorians' progress in 3 years. Later, the Mandalorians openly admitted that Revan was the only reason they lost. They laughed at anyone who claimed that the Republic had any chance at victory prior to Revan's involvement. The Mandalorians were outnumbered 5-1 and were knocking on Coruscant's doorstep before Revan. They were ready to bring the Republic down to its knees in a glorious ball of flame. But something changed. The something was this Jedi. Revan matched them blow for blow, and he gave them a taste of their own medicine that they were not prepared to take. Unfortunately, we have very little examples of Revan's actual victories during the war though, specifics at least, and the examples that we do have are not really Revan's best showings either. The Battle of Duk-Sun saw Revan throw wave after wave of Republic troopers at the Mandalorians, but their fortifications would not break. The Republic saw the most casualties there on that world than in any battle during the war. It was said that for every one Mandalorian death, there were 10 Republic deaths in turn. However, with sheer grit, Revan managed to break the Mandalorians' hold on the world, which ultimately sent them running. This would directly lead to the final battle on Malachor, thus the end of the war. But this is Jedi Revan. Upon Revan's return as a Sith Lord, his genius was now weaponized against the army that he once served. Either out of sheer loyalty or choosing the winning hand, over half of the Republic's military force defected to join Darth Revan. This began what is known as the Jedi Civil War, which was a victory that Revan nearly had in the bag. He used strategic locations around the galaxy that contained dark side nexuses, hoping to use them to fully turn Jedi to the dark side permanently. As his own forces swelled, he didn't just attack the Republic from the outside, he made plans to take them from the inside as well. He placed his spies and agents throughout the levels of the Republic's bureaucracy, weakening them in the Senate meetings by sowing discourse. Along with this, Revan also used an assassin droid of his own design, HK-47, using him to infiltrate and eliminate key targets. Revan did not want the repeated use of the mass shadow generator on Malachor, so he made strategic scalpel cuts at individuals who would hinder his plans for the Republic, rather than carrying out attacks of mass destruction. In the pursuit of this goal, Revan made clever use of both assassins of the dark side and agents like Atton Rand. Rand, despite not being a Force wielder, was trained by Revan on how specifically to kill and hunt Jedi. He was trained on how to divert his thoughts to keep Jedi from sensing his real intentions, making him a deadly and an unpredictable weapon. Against Revan, the Jedi were having to fight a war on multiple fronts. While they were focused on his endless supply of warships being generated by the Starforge, they were completely ignorant to the structural damage being done within their own ranks. Their only hope to save themselves was to try and wipe Revan of all of his memories. The Jedi could not compete with him on a tactical level, so they were forced to take from him his greatest weapon, his mind. Had they not done that, it is unlikely the Republic would have survived Darth Revan. We placed Revan above Obi-Wan and Skywalker because he was able to nearly win 2 separate wars, based only on his intellect. Although the dynamic duo won many battles, neither Kenobi nor Skywalker were on their way towards finishing the Clone Wars by themselves. And as clever as Tarkin can be, he was still incapable of crushing the rebellion on his own. And although this statement may sound shocking, we believe that Revan could have done both. With that all being said, I think we all know who this list was made for. In a discussion about the greatest minds and tacticians in Star Wars lore, the #1 spot will forever and always be reserved by Grand Admiral Thrawn. Starting out, you can take everything we just said about Tarkin's pattern recognition and dial it up to 11. Thrawn has twice the mental capacity of Tarkin without many of the arrogance-related weaknesses. One of Thrawn's most brilliant tactics is being able to tell everything he needed to about a species simply by observing one thing: their art. He would fill his chambers with holographic recreations of artwork from whatever species he was going to attack next. Or if he knew he was encountering a commander of a certain race, he would spend time studying that race's culture, based purely on things such as brushstrokes, sculpting methods, use of color, or emotional undertones. Thrawn could make an accurate report on their culture, their collective mindset, their psychology, and most importantly, their military command styles. In the EU continuity, one of Thrawn's first attacks was on a New Republic archive at Abroa Sky, where he intended to pillage their collections of art and data entries on philosophy and history. For Thrawn, information is his deadliest weapon. Using this knowledge, Thrawn was able to use cultural blind spots against his enemy. When facing a New Republic commander, he made a single attack run, and based on the response from the New Republic's fleet, Thrawn deduced that his opponent was of the Elam species. Thrawn had his only ship facing against several vessels, yet he decided to pull a maneuver known as the Marg Sabal, which seemed like a terrible idea at the time. The ship executing the maneuver would close the distance at high speed against the enemy force. At the very last moment, the ship would then angle the broadside against the enemy. This in turn would face the hangar in the other direction, blocking the enemy from seeing the starfighter formations as they scrambled. The fighters would then form up, and concealed by the hull of the ship, conduct a flanking maneuver to attack the enemy vessels. It was a simple maneuver that was obvious to spot, and it had a highly unstructured attack profile as well. As a result, most experienced opponents would not fall for it. However, Thrawn knew that the Eloman species simply cannot handle the unstructured profile of an attack. Their minds were physiologically incapable of responding to something so simple and brazen. But as a result, Thrawn was able to utterly destroy an enemy that vastly outnumbered him. This wasn't the last time he did this either. When coming back from the unknown regions, Thrawn only had a few warships and was still able to cripple the entirety of the New Republic. He used an ancient war tactic called stateless warfare, which saw him conducting several high-speed raids whenever the New Republic's forces were light. He would find where their defense was few and attack, forcing them to reorient the focus of their fleets, before again finding a brand new target. He did this in rapid succession, confusing his enemies and forcing them to spread their navy thin. In doing so, he lured them away from key targets that became the real goal. His repeated feints ended up leaving the shipyards of Sluis Van vulnerable, which he crushed in a single raid, effectively taking a bat to the knees of the New Republic's navy production. One of the Grand Admiral's trademark maneuvers is a large-scale feint followed by a surprise attack on the real target. On another occasion, he feigned an attack on the planet of Mercist in order to draw Coruscant's defense fleet. Then he suddenly attacked Coruscant itself, but instead of using a fleet, he deployed 24 cloaked asteroid-sized ships and simulated hundreds more. By faking signals for more than 300 asteroids, Thrawn effectively knocked Coruscant out of the war while dedicating hardly any material to the war effort. In the New Republic's planned counterattack at Billabringi, he turned the tables yet again. Admiral Akbar feinted on one world, but Thrawn had laid a trap for him. When Akbar's fleet attacked Billabringi, Thrawn ambushed them and nearly destroyed all of the New Republic's forces. But mid-battle, warlike tactical intelligence is not the only thing Thrawn was skilled at. He also had big pictures in mind as well. When major battles are too risky, Thrawn degrades the enemy through persistent harassment of their economy. After Sluis Van, Thrawn carried out guerrilla strikes on Republic supply convoys and resource worlds. In doing so, he acted as a pirate and captured their supplies to build up strength for his own. He focused on capturing supply assets, stripping convoys of defenses, and forcing the New Republic to either deploy more vessels or abandon entire regions of space. This undercut the New Republic without direct ship-to-ship combat ever being necessary. Anakin and Obi-Wan were masters of deception. Revan could turn the tides of war with his willpower alone, and Tarkin's rule by fear successfully broke his enemy's spirits. But there was absolutely no one that could hold a candle to Thrawn's genius. The Chiss Grand Admiral knew how to pull his enemy's strings and to play them like a puppet. Simply by learning their culture, he could read them like a book and then run circles around them. Jedi couldn't even use the Force to their advantage, due to the fact that he had a plan for that as well. The rebellion could not exploit his arrogance, because he had none. He treated his subordinates well, and always learned from his mistakes, often in real time. Thrawn could be seen correcting himself before he loses. One of the only reasons the rebels won the Galactic Civil War was because Thrawn was absent for most of it. Ironically, Thrawn's only weakness are those around him. His subordinates can often be glory seekers, ignoring orders, messing up his carefully laid out plans. Or perhaps Thrawn could not predict the exposure of some of his lies, which causes some of his closest confidants to betray him. Had none of this happened though, just like Revan, Thrawn likely never would have lost. But with that being the case, Grand Admiral Thrawn is easily the greatest military tactician in Star Wars history. But now, it is up to you. Who do you consider to be the finest military mind in the galaxy? And if you had to fight Grand Admiral Thrawn, who would you select to lead your forces? Once again, it's likely that we did miss someone since we only did a top 5. There have been a ton of extremely intelligent strategists in Star Wars lore, so we're eager to see who your picks are in the comments down below. Until next time though, thank you so much for joining us today, and may the Force be with you.